I've climbed the spires of Primus. I've crossed the wastes and survived ash storms no other could. I drove the Vansar from our enclaves and burned out them Delac. The clan is strong because of me. You think you can do better? You think you're stronger than me? Then come and have a go!
Strength is king in House Goliath. The strongest rule until someone stronger comes along. You get the odds smart and who gets to rule, but if they ain't strong, they won't rule for long.
Those Goliaths might not live long, but they sure make the most of it while they're around.
Dome Runners TV, your guide to the Underhive and beyond.
Come in, my child, come in. You have returned. As you know, I am the Shiver Crimson Oracle of House Escher, and today we shall gaze into the past and open the Librarium Necromundus. We will learn the history of House Goliath, the youngest and most brash of the clan houses of Necromunda. It is said that when all others have perished across the world, House Goliath will remain. We shall gaze into the Scryer Skull and open the Librarium Necromundus, and from it pluck what knowledge we can.
If you like our content, don't forget to like and subscribe, and for as little as $2 a month you can become a patron and help support the show.
Part 1. The Creation of Goliath. The story of the origin of the House of Chains, as the Goliath are also known, is actually rooted in the pernicious rivalry between the clan houses Escher and Vansar. Each house possesses technical talents of a superlative nature, but due to the careful division of labor imposed by House Helmar, both possess knowledge the other does not. Indeed, while there is no love lost between the two houses, they're nonetheless in symbiosis, with each requiring the other for long-term survival. Both houses were compelled to collaborate by the Imperial House, working on a project that would need both of their knowledge: the creation of a new, unregistered abhuman strain, tough enough to endure the harshest conditions on the planet, but capable of more advanced cognition than the Ogren, able to run their own lines without supervision. Each house took the job, and both hoped that in the process they could learn enough from their rivals to further their own ends. In the case of the Escher, they hoped to develop a stable source of genetic material to make up for their house's flawed male offspring. The Vansar hoped to learn techniques to increase the resilience of their rad-damaged bodies. The result was a tense collaboration fraught with conflict. Alberoth Helmar chose to force this collaboration as a response to the mass exodus of workers caused by the first awakening of the Cult of the Redemption near the end of the 39th millennium. With workers flocking to the newly formed cult, productivity dropped harshly, and worse, it appeared there was competition for the worship and authority Alberoth believed were owed to him. He wanted a new, more obedient class of workers, and all the houses hoped to help, but the standouts were Vansar and Escher. The two houses fought even as they attempted to crack the genetic secrets to build the ultimate laborers, a shadow war that they did their best to conceal from the Imperial House. For decades they worked, taking lessons from past failed experiments each house had engaged in. Sabotage beset the project at every turn, both between the two architects of the project and outside meddling from the noble and clan houses alike. House Delac was the only major institution not to challenge the project, though why is anyone's guess. Despite the setbacks, the project bore fruit by the close of the 39th millennium, resulting in the first laborers of what would become known as Goliath stock coming into service. Ironically, the project was a failure for both collaborators despite being a success in the eyes of the Imperial House. Goliath bodies would prove useless as a source of organs to extend the lives of the Vansar. The Goliath physiology was suited for a short, brutal life. Similarly, the Goliaths were mostly sterile, making them useless for Escher's purposes as well. The Imperial House, as always, got what it wanted from the clan houses in the end. Giving this new engineered slave species a name of one of the House Escher's defeated former foes is an act of final insult. The Goliaths were ready to be mass-produced, grown from engineered genetic tissue in enormous amniovats. Each new laborer would be imprinted with a set of basic knowledge via a data slug implanted into their brain after they finished growing, allowing the short-lived Goliaths to immediately begin their toil. The Goliaths were a superior worker, more resilient to toxic gases and radiation, as well as much stronger than the standard humans Necromunda's industry was built upon. But, despite the success of the project, the creation of sufficient Goliaths to fuel the needs of the planet was proceeding slowly, as the ongoing production required the participation of the two houses, who both blamed each other for failing to find their desired outcomes. and considering the extent of their sabotage efforts, it may well have been true. Still, the steady stream of Goliath laborers spread across the planet, the slave guild purchasing them in large quantities to bring to every hive they could reach. Goliaths were given the worst work on the planet, forced into jobs that would kill the rest of the laborers, repairing the outer shells of hives in brutal ash storms, working in the most toxic and low-lying domes, running forges and mines, even deploying into the bilges of the Eye of Selene, the enormous space station orbiting the planet. Even as the Goliaths spread, unnoticed by their overseers, they began to grow an awareness of their condition, in time educating them, making them more capable. When this was finally noticed, it was taken as a benefit, since the short lifespan of the Goliath prevented them from becoming a true threat to the overarching order. Any generation that grew too independent would be gone before they could organize. What is it they say about assumption being the mother of all? Part 2. From Slaves to Clan House. Slavery is a condition inherent to the structure of Necromunda. The planet's population is functionally a pyramid, with the power descending from the imperial house to the noble houses who own much of the planet's productive capacity, claiming all but the essential services controlled by the guilds. The clan houses, far more numerous than the nobles, administer the vast holdings of the noble houses, and underneath these institutions are the vast majority of the planet's population. The helot classes, who labor their entire lives with no hope of changing their station, their life tied to a job until such time that they might be sold back to the slave guild. The only protection from this fate was association with a house or guild, or fleeing beyond the reach of the Slavers' Guild into the bad zones of the Underhive or Outlands. Slave uprisings are a short and suicidal affair in most cases, ensuring a bare minimum of compliance through the threat of violence. The Goliaths, however, had advantages the other helots did not. Their bodies allowed them to survive in conditions that the forces of their authority could not. They were also essentially living weapons, their enhanced physique making them significantly harder to kill and more capable of violence simultaneously. Since the Goliaths had been seeded into the harshest environments, their revolt began quietly, simply killing or otherwise replacing the overseers with their own, giving the most outlying Goliath settlements autonomy. When it started to become clear that all the Goliaths were seizing power over their own, open hostilities began between the other clan houses that administered these labor gangs. But while the fighting broke out, the Imperial House refused to intervene. The Goliaths who took control of their own territories were the longer-lived, wiser ones that the Van Saar had helped make possible, and through their developing cunning they concluded that rather than reduce output or workloads in liberated areas, they increased it, pushing their own kind even harder than their former masters. This would prove to be crucial to their efforts. Lady Juns Helmar thought her father's designation of these capable beings as a permanent slave race was a strange and contradictory decision, considering that all on Necromunda owed their lives to House Helmar, making all, in effect, slaves. It is said that she spoke of this uprising: if the Goliaths want to govern themselves, then let them prove their worth. It would prove to be the alterations made by House Escher that were the most instrumental in the House of Chains becoming independent, as the female Goliaths soon began to bear the first generation of naturally born Goliaths. Longer lived and more intellectually developed than their Vatborn kin, these capable individuals would become known as Natborn. When the clan houses attempted to embargo the technology to make future generations, the Natborn became more and more of a problem, until finally the Van Saar saw the writing on the wall and decided to make peace. In a historic meeting between Duke Hendrik X of Van Saar and the over-tyrant Heffram, the Vat Mother, the two houses made a deal to exchange Vat tech for normalizing trade with the vast Goliath holdings. This would not immediately end the Goliath conflict. Resistance to their independence continued across the rest of the planet, even as relations normalized in Hive Primus. In some places, such as Hive Quintus, the Goliath were successfully exterminated, but where Goliath remained, they continued to fight. It would be years before they were all under self-rule, but eventually even the distant grind rigs of the Northern Spoil and countless other far-flung locations came to be controlled by the Goliaths themselves. Within 500 years of their creation, House Goliath had gained de facto independence, eventually being formalized as the Sixth Clan House. The rivals were reluctant to accept their elevation, but the Goliaths had been forged in the harshest conditions on the planet, making them a more capable fighting force than any of their rivals alone. Goliath had gone from slaves to taking the title of House of Chains. It's believed the name was initially a pejorative thrown at them due to their origins, but the Goliaths embraced it and now wear it with pride. Part 3. The House of Chains. Almost as soon as any Goliath settlement was liberated, They were immediately re-enslaved by their own kin, changing little about their life other than who was swinging the whip. Such is often the case with revolution. Seeking to replace one tyrant, often all that occurs is a new one takes their place. This led to a culture of might makes right within the house, with the leader of any given district the toughest and best in any scrap. The fighting forces of the house, the gangs, would take on the same structure, generally following that the biggest and the meanest would be the leader. This crude order didn't improve the life of the average Goliath, but it did create avenues for some to rise or fall, giving the headstrong a reason to train and hopefully fight for their place. Even with the birth of Nat-born Goliaths, the vast majority of their numbers are grown in the amniovats, destined for short, brutal lives. But while they still depend on data slugs for their education, the Goliaths modified the original format of the slugs, incorporating knowledge of the house structure and history, giving each new Goliath a sense of their place in the Great Web, as well as feelings of kinship with others of their line, and knowledge of their work and the use of clan weaponry. Most Vatborn are sterile, but not all, ensuring the continued capability of the clan to create more alphas. With the House's liberation came the existence of unborn, individuals who are not Goliaths by birth, but who use complex genetic and hormonal therapy to develop nearly comparable physiques to those born of the House. Generally retaining fertility, these individuals are not looked down upon by the rest of the clan, as long as they prove their strength, and instead become an important source of genetic diversity for the clan, ensuring they don't fall victim to inbreeding over numerous generations of a small portion of the population reproducing. Having taken their place, House Goliath begins to play the great game. When Khador preachers in Hive Rothgul spread rumors that Goliath are Xenos in origin and preying on the Hive's babies, rather than attempting to dispel the rumors, the Goliath gangs began painting their skin elaborate colors and used the fear of their otherworldly nature to their advantage. In Hive Primus, in the final century of the 40th millennium, the Goliaths began an aggressive push to claim more territory from the other houses, greatly increasing their holdings. This growth would bring the clan more respect among their reluctant peers, but would also increase the stakes of leadership, leading to more internal conflicts as the house's doctrine of might makes right drives a constant simmering power struggle. Limited by their lack of technical knowledge, the Goliaths began purchasing or conquering as many knowledgeable slaves as possible, a project known as the Theft of Knowledge. They also began an aggressive breeding program, creating a large number of Ogren, who integrated well with the Goliaths, looking up to them as wise leaders. The number of natural-born Goliath continued to increase, leading to conflicts between the Vatborn and the Natborn, which became so significant that the Over-Tyrant had to intervene to bring peace and ensure the fertility of the Goliath lines would continue. Continued efforts to establish further independence see Goliath stealing knowledge from the Vansar data vaults, hoping to uncover more secrets of the amniovats. The house also continues to expand, waging warfare against the forges and smelting pits across Hive Primus and beyond. In time, they corner the market on metal refining, establishing them as a true power player on the planet, as all houses become dependent on them for raw materials. In under 1,000 years, House Goliath had outpaced clans that were many thousands of years older, and managed to make themselves essential to the ongoing output of the entire planet. Experimentation with chemical and genetic enhancements continued within the house thanks to the knowledgeable individuals the house controlled, supplies from the narco-lords, and a willingness among the Goliath to risk grievous harm for a chance to become stronger than their peers. This process would lead to the creation of Zerkers and Stimmers, even larger and more brutal examples of Goliath kind, though often these enhancements limited the subject in other ways. A Stimmer is one who experiments with custom cocktails of chems, pushing their physique to the absolute limits. These individuals are prone to bouts of rage and become more impulsive from their dosing, but the greatest risk to a Stimmer is that of becoming a Zerker, the result of mutations caused by overuse of muscle growth stims. The Zerker is a twisted, hulking beast, descended into simple-mindedness, but possessing the greatest strength of their kind. As the 41st millennium comes to a close, the Goliaths seem to be the only ones on Necromunda thriving. Hives continue to fall to entropy, costing countless lives. The Goliaths have in turn begun to believe that they will eventually be the inheritors of the planet, as the rest of the population slowly succumbs to worsening conditions, until only the strongest remain. They do not speak of this outside of the house, however, as this is a base heresy against the Imperial House. Part 4. House Organization. The brutal nature of the contest of power within House Goliath may lead one to conclude that only the most brutish and mean amongst the Goliath ranks rise to power, at the expense of intellect and leadership ability. This is actually far from the case, for while the Goliaths won't follow anyone they see to be weak, the art of gathering support needed a challenge for power, as much a display of diplomacy as raw strength. And while a fight for leadership is inevitable, these fights favor the clever as often as they do the combatant with the greatest raw strength. Goliaths depend entirely on chems to help maintain their peak physique, and keep their overtaxed organs running for the duration of their short lifespan. They acquire these from trade with House Escher and the Narco Lords, ensuring that, while House Goliath has grown mighty, they cannot survive without the contribution of other house industries. These compounds, combined with the many changes to the Goliath's DNA, can also be used to alter their new Goliaths, making it possible for clever alphas to customize their fighting forces or workers to meet the needs of a particular environment. The house is ruled by the Over-Tyrant, a powerful figure that all Goliaths aspire to become, and perhaps unique among the houses of Necromunda, any could possess the potential to ascend to this role. This possibility helps keep the house in line, as keeping to the existing order affords more opportunities for advancement than outright rebellion. The Over-Tyrant is also known as the Alpha of Alphas, and has more or less unchecked authority over every member of the house. This centralized authority fits the culture of the house and does provide some internal stability, but it does create vulnerabilities to assassination attempts. The current Over-Tyrant is Varen Gore, aka Gore Iron Eye, aka Gore the Fist, a Natborn who first served as a Forgeborn in the fighting pits of Shatterbone Arena beneath Hive City. After rising through the gladiatorial contests, he went on to serve as the leader of a gang, making a name for himself leading near suicidal raids against the other clan houses. Rising to become the Alpha of Acropolis Hive, he would in time challenge and kill the previous Over-Tyrant, Rygar Droon. So has the title been passed from Alpha to Alpha, leading all the way back to the first Over-Tyrant, Hepharum the Vat Mother. Legend says she was the first of the Goliaths to give birth, and she's revered perhaps above all others. Under the Over-Tyrant are the Alphas of each hive, who form a sort of ruling house council. Under each Alpha there are other Alphas who run the major settlements and population centers of that hive. These individuals are the most ambitious and dangerous in their house, and they make their objectives known, gathering every display of power they can, festooning their armor with trophies. Few contenders ever make it to the point of issuing a challenge, but for those who do, the process is ritualized and treated as sacred by the rest of the house. If an aspiring Alpha fails in their challenge, they are generally killed, a demonstration of the cost of raising arms against their superiors. As the Alphas have unchecked authority over everyone underneath them, they tend to have access to the house's best medical care, ensuring that, assuming they don't fall to a challenge, Alphas are the longest lived of their kind. One such Alpha, Thulin Rex, the 99th Over-Tyrant, lived a record 50 years, making him one of the longest-lived Goliaths of all time. This longevity helps ensure continuity in the clan's operations, from factory output to countering rival houses, and ensuring the continued steady production of the amniovats needed to keep the population growing. Further down there are the slave bosses, forge bosses, and gang bosses in each settlement, making for a relatively egalitarian structure, with the various gangs all potentially able to ascend as rapidly as their abilities allow. A new Goliath, whether grown in a vat, raised in a creche, or forged from non-Goliath stock, immediately faces their first trials, having to prove themselves to their kin. These are the so-called Forgeborn. They're given the worst jobs, and prove themselves, or fail and die in the process. Some labor in the slag pits, dodging molten metal. Others serve as pit fighters thrown against the harshest foes. Still others work for the gangs, being used as cannon fodder or forward scouts. They often carry the least reliable weapons in a gang, such as the potent storm welder, a repurposed tool capable of frying anyone downfield, at the risk of taking out the bearer as well. I have become weary. You must go. Return to me in a cycle, and I shall continue this lesson. Thanks as always to Carl Casey at Whitebat Audio for the show's music. And of course, thank you to my patrons. You guys make all of this possible. And if you too would like to become a patron, for as little as $2 a month, you can help support this show and keep it coming on the regular, patreon.com/domerunners. And of course, don't forget to check out the podcast. You can find it on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, or at domerunners.buzzsprout.com. And everybody out there, please stay safe and don't forget to change your paint water.